Does parenting often feel for you like it does for me, like you are building the plane as you fly it? Well, if that's the case, and if you are expecting another baby, or if you already have a second baby and you are having trouble navigating all that goes into caring for a second baby while you still provide as much care and attention to your first baby or your toddler or your preschooler or your elementary age child as possible, then I have such an exciting episode for you. When I first encountered Katie from the podcast Child Life on Call, I knew that I had found someone really special. I first found her on her podcast. And then, as you do, I found her on social media. And then I slid into her DMs. And I told her how meaningful her podcast was to me. And as a person with a disability, I told her quite sincerely how having had someone like her would have benefited my family. And I told her a story that I have not told very many people. But in the DMs, I talked to her about how I have this memory of being maybe 3 or 4 and standing in a children's hospital where I got prosthetic care. And I must have needed an x-ray or something of my residual limb. And I was supposed to be in a gown, I guess, but for some reason I wasn't. And I was just standing in the hallway in my underwear. And this was back in the 80s. And I don't think this would have happened today, but I remember being very, very embarrassed. And I think if there was someone around like Katie, they would have picked up on this and they would have helped me feel more comfortable in this medical situation. And I ended up spending a lot of time in children's hospitals because that's where I received my prosthetic care for my entire childhood. And I'm so thankful to those places because it allowed me to get great prosthetic care and allowed me to meet other people like me who had physical disabilities. And I'm sure there were child life specialists in those environments, but I never really encountered them. So I brought Katie on to talk about a very specific topic for nursing parents, and that is how we can help older children adapt to bringing a new baby home. So feel Katie's warmth and her love for families and her deep desire to help families feel safe in medical environments and her sincere belief that families know their children best and sometimes just need a little bit of help. So enjoy. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to my podcast, The Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding struggles and triumphs through the lens of systemic barriers, so that you know your baby feeding struggles are not your fault and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I get to be on your podcast now.
I know. My episode on your show just came out, so I will link that in the show notes. So tell us about yourself and your podcast and the work that you do before we get into today's content.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm such a fan of you, of lactation consultants in general, and of really just anybody who's willing to take time to support moms in their journey of motherhood. My name is Katie Taylor. I am a certified child life specialist. I live here in Austin, Texas, pretty far from you. I've been a child life specialist for over 13 years. And if you don't know what that is, totally fine. Many people do not. But what we do, we primarily work in children's hospitals and in different medical facilities that serve children. And we help kids and families cope with the medical experience in a variety of ways, from coping to medical education to pain management and everywhere in between. And we really look at family centered care and trauma informed care as the values for us to provide psychosocial support.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I didn't know I have had interactions with child life specialists for my son a couple of times, not for any big issue, but I did not know what they were at the time.
Hmm.
I could tell the difference when he was at a hospital that had the support of child life specialists and when he was at a hospital that did not have that support, because the attention to detail for the family and for the child specifically, explaining procedures and helping problem solve when a child feels scared and working with the providers to limit the amount of stress for a blood draw or something like that is so critical. So when I found your podcast, even though I am really not a family member that is impacted by child life specialists, I fell in love with it because I loved hearing the ways that the work that you do impacts families, and then how that has a ripple effect because now you are helping so many other child life specialists improve care for families.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, is that you can tell when child life has been in a facility, and not just because you have met a child life specialist there, but a lot of considerations for pain management are taken in. And we've looked at triage, made sure that that process is as family centered and child centered as possible. And if you are seeking care at a hospital and they don't have child life, please advocate, ask if they do have any access to child life services, and if they don't, that's okay. You can always come. There's a lot of us on social media spreading the word and awareness about how we can make parents feel more empowered during their child's care. Yeah, we're always just wanting to be resources and education, because ultimately, a lot like you, Lo, is we don't get to go home with families. And so what can we do in the moment to teach and educate so you continue to have a positive lifelong experience in the medical setting?
And I brought you here today because you have education and training in a area that overlaps with mine, that while many lactation consultants, we naturally help families do this work, unless we have sought out this niche training on our own, it is not something that we have expertise in beyond the fact that we might have helped many families cope with the
Mm,
situation. And this is helping an older sibling adapt to bringing a new baby home and all the care that goes into that new baby, the breastfeeding around the clock or the bottle feeding around the clock, if that's what a family is doing. And so, how do we support a family to support the older sibling who is now being replaced or is having their time divided? Yeah.
yeah, of course. A couple of things come to mind. One is that kind of just the whole idea is really the basis of child life, is that it's really hard to expect someone, anyone, a human, an adult, a child, to be able to cope with something if they don't know what to expect. And so we call that preparation. And preparation can happen in a variety of ways. It should happen in a variety of ways, whether it's verbal preparation, so explaining what something is going to be like. So this would be parents explaining what it is going to look like when baby comes home from the hospital, even before they get there. When you get home from the hospital and you're propped up on a couch for 3 days, that's different than what you're normally doing, right? So just preparing them that that's what they can expect, that baby is going to have to be fed a lot. Baby eats a lot more than I eat or you eat. And actually, they're not eating at all. They're actually drinking milk, because I think we can say, oh, baby's hungry, they need to eat. And then all they're doing is
My goodness,
drinking.
yes.
But
That can
for
be really
kids,
confusing to someone who
yes,
distinguishes between hunger and thirst.
totally, totally. And that's just one of those little clues that the more you can really break down in as simple and honest ways as possible is great. And then really getting into, after preparation, how can I expect my child to act? And so we can break that down by child development. Likely, toddlers to preschoolers to school age is what we'll be dealing with the most when we're bringing baby home. And toddlers have an incredibly egocentric point of view, which always makes me chuckle because it's totally that just toddler world of how is my life changing? What's going to be different for me? And why do I have mom less? And not so much caring about mom's nipples hurting, but more about how is their world affected.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I would love to hear an example of what this would look like for this specific example that you gave of preparation and
Mm,
naming what it will look like and how that differs from their current life
yeah.
for like a 2-year-old versus what that might look like for a 4-year-old because
Yeah.
they're in a different place developmentally. So a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, you might be able to have a conversation with them, but
Mm.
a 2-year-old, I'm imagining that might be a lot of role playing, but I don't know. So I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, you picked up exactly. So kids learn through play, especially our toddlers and our preschoolers. Toddlers is like, how can I manipulate and play with something? So play may literally be like, I want to play with the bottles. I want to play with this or that. I want to role play like what you said and take a stuffed animal and hold it up to me. And I think people can get really wigged out when they see little boys doing that. And there's no gender roles in play. Play is exploration. So there's no need to be alarmed or even correct or fix. They're trying to understand the world around them and how they interact with it. And then preschoolers really turn into that magical thinking, right? They may say something, a 4-year-old may say something like, they're drinking my magic milk too because they come through me and it feels cold. And you're like, it does? But they're just imagining, they're just playing. And so rather than trying to maybe fix or correct, you can do a couple things. One of those things is to just take mental note and identify maybe some misconceptions that they're showing you through their play. And if you feel the need, kind of follow up or redirect. But we don't want to correct a child's play because that can really decrease their self esteem. And really, they're just trying to explore, and there's no wrong or right way to do it.
Yes, I love that, and we wouldn't correct when a 4-year-old said that they were going to drive to the moon. We wouldn't say, "Oh, it's
Mm,
not actually possible to drive to the moon." That's magical play. They're learning about their world, so we can what I'm hearing from you say is we can relax into knowing that imaginative play does not mean that is a misconception that they are going to now carry for the rest of their lives. If you allow your son to mimic what you're doing by nursing the baby, they're not going to now think that they will be nursing babies in the future.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I always tell this story where I was doing a little bit of medical play with a child, and we have those cloth dolls, and she took a red marker and she colored all inside. Her entire doll turned red. And I asked her and I said, so tell me about your doll. And she said, those are the fireballs shooting inside my body. And I had to take a minute and say, do you think that there are fireballs inside your body? She's like, no, that's impossible. So she was playing and I was reading into the play, but just
Ah.
naming, validating, oh, I see you're coloring really hard. Does that mean there's a lot of fire right there? Our job is to really be observers of play and
Mm.
taking mental notes. And maybe I'll follow up with this or that later. One of my other favorite pieces of advice when it comes to toddlers, preschoolers, and even school agers is to give them jobs and choices when you need to take your time away to feed baby. We can call it the breastfeeding basket, the bottle basket, but this is a basket full of items, toys, maybe it's got an iPad show in there, whatever works for your family. But this special basket or iPad or show only comes out when mommy is feeding baby. And as soon as mom is done feeding baby, then it's time for the basket to go away. And that does a couple of things. One, you can work with your child to decide what goes in the basket. So they're in charge and they're like, these are what I want to play with when mom feeds the baby, and they have a little bit of control over what's in the basket. The second thing is it becomes pretty special. It's only allowed when mom feeds baby, right? And so that has some novelty to it. It's something that they can only get when mom feeds, and that's because you need all your hands to feed baby and you want your toddler to stay busy. So some people call it like a busy basket, but it's something special that only comes out and goes away during the feeding process.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And I can imagine people might want to know what specific things go in there, but this is when you tune into your knowledge of your child. What do they love? What are things that they've asked for? What are things that feel really special to them? And then you
Mm.
would incorporate that into the basket so that it does
Yeah.
feel really special for them.
And a lot of people ask, what can I do for you and baby after you bring baby home? And you can say, I'm trying to put together this busy basket for my toddler or preschooler. They
Yes.
love monster trucks. They love this or that. Anything that we can make special for this basket would be a great gift.
This is Lo popping in for just a quick second because Katie did not mention this, but I noticed in digging through her resources that she has this amazing little Amazon shop that has great gift ideas for both parents who are going to be in the hospital for any amount of time and for kiddos. So if you want to peruse her Amazon shop, you might check it out because there might be some good ideas in there for this basket that she's talking about for your kiddos. And I'll have that linked in the show notes. I love that because so many people they ask and a lot of us feel uncomfortable saying, I would like you to come over and wash my dishes, or I would like
Mm,
you to fold my laundry. Those are tasks that we often suggest people ask people to do for them. But this is one where I feel like a lot of people might feel more comfortable asking people to create for them. And even if you had a few that were lined up so that once one basket becomes a little boring, then there's another one in the ready. Often people are so happy to do that for you and they're not having to come into your home and invade your space or
yeah.
look at your dirty dishes if you don't want people to do that.
Exactly. And there is that element of preparation you want to keep too, and just prepare the child, your toddler, the sibling that we're going to put this basket away when mommy's done feeding. So they're know to expect that because you don't want to have to deal with a breakdown about the basket going away. Say in a
Mhm.
few hours, it's going to come back up and it'll be ready for you to play with again.
Yeah. And I've heard some tips. I was trying to rack my brain for the exact language, so maybe you will have this language at the ready about the way we can frame that time we have to take for the baby. So I've heard some tips. Maybe it was from Janet Lansbury. I don't know if you're familiar with her
I
work
love her.
at all. Yeah, but
Yeah.
she does a lot of this work with parents, helping them recognize that it's okay for our kids to express their feelings. So I know when I was bringing home my second, my oldest was almost 4, not quite, and we had conversations about how he actually wasn't looking forward to this baby. And to this day, he's 9 and she's 5, and he'll break down and say, I don't like having a younger sister. And many of us feel like we have this. We need to say, no, you love your sister. What would
Mm,
our family be like without her? And I have those moments. But in the
same.
moment when he's saying, I really hate having a sister, it's really annoying.
Yeah.
I have learned from Janet Lansbury to not be afraid of that and to say, "Oh my gosh, I remember what that's like. I'm a middle child,
Yeah.
and it was so hard. It was so
Yeah.
hard to have a little sibling annoying me all the time and wanting to play with me when I wasn't wanting to play,
Yeah.
and I totally get it, and you're a great big brother, and even
Yeah.
though you're a great big brother, it's okay to have these feelings."
Yeah, it's when they say something like that, it's really my life has changed, my world has changed, and I'm desiring something. Is that to spend more time with mom or is it to have more alone time myself? And really chasing the why, right? And one of
Mhm.
my favorite books is No Drama Discipline. And so
Yes, I
they
love that one.
often, yeah, they talk about how it's not actually about the outbursts or the words, try to chase the why of why that's happening. And is there 30 minutes that you can spend special time with sibling? Obviously, it can't happen during feeding time. And it's okay to set those very kind, compassionate, but non negotiable boundaries. When I am feeding baby, this is really important, especially at the beginning. I'm not going to be able to help you open that toy. As soon as I'm done and I have my hands free, I'll be able to help you open it. You don't have to have guilt about saying no and all of the meaning behind that their life is different. There's a boundary, and drawing that line is actually really compassionate for you so that you can have your hands free and concentrate on what you need to, but also is really kind for your child to learn that boundaries exist in this world and they're going to have to get used to them.
Yeah, and then allowing them to express whatever emotions in a safe way
Totally.
that happen as a result of holding the boundary.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
you talked about this long-term preparation, but then the example that you just gave made me think about also some short-term preparation before each feeding. Oh, I'm about to sit down for a feeding. I'm not going to be available. What does that look like? What do you recommend that families do so that at each feeding, the child is set up for success to play with that busy basket and to know that it's going to be put away?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am always just a fan of preparing as much as possible with as much advance notice, so long as it's not causing more stress, right? The preparation could look like, okay, I'm going to have to feed baby here in a couple of minutes. Do you want to help me set a timer? And then when the timer goes off, that's when mommy's going to concentrate on baby to feed and you can get out your basket. And so you're almost preparing them, but you're giving them a role in setting the timer so that they know what to expect. So just as much as you can incorporate their participation, giving them jobs. Do you want to get out the basket first, or should mommy get settled first and then you can go get the basket? Small little things that really put them back in the driver's seat of what they want to do, giving them jobs. And it's good to prepare them too. Mommy's not going to be able to do this for about this length of time. And kids have a hard time with understanding how long 15 minutes is. So you could say about the length of a grizzly show on Netflix or something
Yeah.
that makes sense for them.
Ah,
And rather focusing on that mommy can't help you right now, you can focus on you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And then mommy's going to have her hands busy for a little bit.
yeah, and I'll be available in instead of saying, "I can't help you right now," I can imagine maybe changing the language to say when you would be available could be more
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other question I had was around this language of if I'm always saying, "Oh, I can't help you, the baby needs this. I can't help you, the baby needs that. I can't help you, I have to do this." That can start to build resentment from the older sibling to the younger sibling. So do you have any tips about how parents can phrase all the caretaking they're doing in a way that doesn't make it the baby's fault?
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah, and if you have been saying that or do say that a lot, like all hope is not lost, resentment will not build forever. But what I like to do is just relate it back to an experience that they have themselves. When you go to the bathroom, you have things you have to do to take care of yourself, and you have to wash your hands and you have to wipe. And then when you get into the car, we have to make sure that your seatbelt is, we all have jobs. And when you can relate it back to their normal experience, rather than talking about it's the baby, it's part of your job as a mom that you are a mom, you chose to do this when he was little or she was little, you did the exact same thing for them. So just bridging the gap of this is what happens when you have a baby. There are other people. When your friend Jason had a little baby, his mommy had to do this too. So bringing in those kind of social and peer connections can really help make them feel less alone and really validated.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then any specific tips for helping the older child when there are even just the typical appointments, like the 3-day postpartum appointment and then the 1-week baby appointment, and then sometimes if there's low milk supply struggle or a weight issue, there are additional appointments, and
Mm,
often, especially if a partner doesn't have parental leave, the mom, the primary caretaker is taking both children with them. So do you have any
yeah.
tips about this?
Yeah. It's a lot harder on mom to have to just logistics wise bring another child along. That's when I would go back to those little jobs or packing a bag for doctor's appointments. This is going to be the bag we take every time we go in for a weight check. What should we put inside the bag? And also, I think exposing them to new experiences around the doctor that are positive and don't have anything to do with them can actually be a great learning experience. So they're not going to the doctor to get a shot, they're going to the doctor to learn about a body. And that's a really big teaching moment. I know you're exhausted. I know you're tired and you don't have to do those things at the beginning, but maybe try to flip the script on it's really difficult to have to bring my other child to this is an opportunity for them to learn about life and learn about experiences with the doctor and without the panic that something's happening to them.
Yeah. And to your point of not feeling like you have to turn everything into a teaching moment. And also, if you have the capacity, there are great resources like Daniel Tiger will have a show about the doctor. So if you watch that and then okay, we're going to the doctor, but this time it's not for you. So now you get to see it
Yeah.
from a different perspective.
And you know your little baby or brother best. And will you help carry the pacifier? And will you make sure that you think that they're warm enough? And I really need your help while we're doing this. And it could really be helpful to sometimes have that extra pair of hands, even if
Mhm.
it's just to grab a pacifier from across the room.
Yeah, and what do you suggest families say if the older sibling does not want to help? Because I've encountered that where they have no interest in helping be a caretaker for the younger
Mm.
baby.
Yeah, I would just validate that response and say that makes a lot of sense that you don't want to help because X, Y, or Z. I can tell that you're really busy concentrating on this or that. And then what are the expectations for your family and your family values? I don't always want to unload the dishwasher, but sometimes we have to do it to help our family. And so sometimes we have choices about what we can and can't help with. And sometimes I need your help and I need you to do the thing that I'm asking you to do. But really, it's validating it, making it as non threatening. And when you put it in an encouraging or positive way, like you're the only person who knows how to do this job really well, you do it best, that can provide a little bit of self esteem and make them more interested in wanting to do whatever it is that you're asking.
And I love that answer actually incorporates because I have the tendency to be a little more lenient. Oh, don't make the child do it because then they're going to build more resentment. But I love that your answer actually says you can decide how to respond based on the values that you want to instill in your children. It
Mm,
does not have to be the same response for every family. And your response one day, you might have the capacity to
right.
actually hold the boundary and say, you're going to do this. And another day, you might frame it like, I'll do this for you because I can see you're busy doing something else or you're holding other things in your hand but it might really be because you know what I don't have the mental
The
load
mental
right now
space,
to
yes.
hold this boundary and I'm just going to do it.
100%. Yes, we all that's the ebb and flow of life, right? Is when you have the capacity to put things into practice, but that's not reality all of the time.
Yeah. Are there any other essential tips that you tell families when they
Mm.
are expecting a new baby or anything that you want to share with people who know that they might be having a more difficult experience welcoming a baby into the world, like going to have a NICU stay or anything like
Mm.
that, and then also caring for an older child?
Yeah, I think especially if you have spent time in antepartum away from your younger child who is at home, that can be really difficult in a long NICU stay. And so we'll just go back to that child development is how does it affect their world for toddlers and for preschoolers? Are they making up a more scary idea in their head than what's actually happening? So if you can think about it in that way, and mommy is going to leave to go visit baby in the NICU, but it's not going to be like when mommy had to spend the night for 2
Mm,
weeks,
mm,
and just maybe looking at some of those fears head on. A great way to understand what a child is thinking is to get down on the floor and play with them a little bit. I promise it does not have to take long. You can get a couple of stuffed animals out and start saying, "This mommy needs to go to the NICU," and just really start to investigate what your child is thinking. I always go back to preparation. What can they expect to happen so that they can cope with what's going to happen, and what is their choice? Do they want to get involved? Do they want to have a job? How can I empower my child during it?
mhm. Well, thank you so much. And I know that even if a family does not have a child who is in a complex medical situation where they will be dealing with child life specialists, I do think that any family or any professional who listens to the Milk Making Minutes will benefit from listening to your podcast, Child Life on Call, and following you on Instagram. I don't know where else you are, so I'll have you share that because the tips you give, I have found can apply just to everyday life in parenting because it is about getting into the mind of the child and then helping make sense of the world around them. And that can
Mm.
apply to families regardless of what their medical situations are.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm childlifeoncall.com. I'm most active on Instagram, but on Facebook and dabble in TikTok every once in a while. But yeah, to your point, I've worked with families before who, like during their cancer treatments, worked with child life specialists, and then have later said, we now implement some of those things even during diaper changes for our second kid who doesn't have cancer. But just some of the mindset that comes from child life can be really helpful. So I'm so appreciative to talk with you and your listeners, and feel free to reach out if you need anything.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Lo.
Don't you just feel like Katie is your new best friend in Austin? I definitely do. And I know all the families that she has worked with over the years must feel that way too, and the child life specialists that she supports to do their job. So, all of her information will be linked in the show notes. Whether you are a parent or a professional and you would like to continue the conversation about how we support older children while we care for younger babies and nurse them, then please join my Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook. That's the place where we have these deeper conversations, where I post research articles and where we take polls about what our individual experiences are, and where we all come together to try to understand what other people's experiences have been so that we can improve the milk making situation. And if this podcast has been meaningful to you in any way, please share it with a friend and take a minute, 60 seconds, to rate and review it on your favorite podcasting app. Thank you so much.